In the hushed atmosphere of a Boston coffee shop, a voice sliced through the tranquility like a blade. "You filthy maid. You think you can get close to my daughter?" Moments later, a broom came crashing down upon the shoulder of a woman who was using sign language to communicate with a little girl. Yet, this was merely the prologue to a tale that would reverberate throughout the city. Conversations halted mid-flow, leaving only the soft hiss of the espresso machine in the wake of the disturbance. Maya, at 29, had been kneeling slightly, her hands weaving intricate, fluid shapes in American Sign Language toward a small girl seated at the corner table. To uncover the truth behind that heart-wrenching moment, and to understand what compelled the man who publicly shamed her to return and seek forgiveness, subscribe, like, and share a comment about your location. You never know, someone nearby might be tuning in as well. Just when it appeared that all would culminate in resentment, an unexpected event unfolded outside, turning the entire scenario upside down. It was then that every gaze shifted to Maya, the woman who had recently faced humiliation before an audience. The girl's large brown eyes sparkled with the faintest hint of a smile, a delicate expression that appeared to have taken ages to cultivate. Then the voice erupted into the scene. Nathan Carter, a formidable tech billionaire in New York, loomed above them, his face contorted with rage and a deeper, unsettling revulsion. In his hand, as if snatched in a hasty moment from the service station, was a broom. Before Maya could rise, a sudden jolt reverberated through her shoulder with a sharp crack. Gasps echoed from the surrounding tables. If you find yourself empathizing with the character in this tale, please like this video and share your location in the comments. After all, someone nearby might be experiencing this as well. But heed my warning. Keep your distance from her. Do you understand? Ethan growled, striking once more, the broom connecting with her arm, dirty thoughts swirling in his mind, believing he could deceive his way in, scheming who knows what. "I recognize your kind." Maya lifted her hands, more for self-defense than to communicate, her breath hitching in her throat. "Sir, I assure you, that was not my intention. Please refrain from speaking to me in that manner." Ethan's voice cut through the air, sharp and icy, as he declared, "I see through the schemes of people like you. Your dirty tricks, your sweet facade, all while you plot to harm decent souls." His upper lip curled in disdain. From 2 tables away, a middle-aged white man leaned toward his wife, his voice just loud enough to carry. "That's the problem with them, always trying to cozy up to the wealthy, never knowing their place." His wife nodded tightly, her expression one of approval. "Pretty face, but you can't trust them. They've always got an angle." Nearby, a woman draped in a designer scarf leaned in to whisper to her friend, "She's probably hoping for a handout, or worse, looking to trap him in some lawsuit. You know how they are." The whispers wafted through the cafe's warm air like smoke, each word piercing Maya deeper than Ethan's broom. Her shoulders stiffened, yet she remained silent. There was no point in arguing with those who had already made up their minds. Anthony Tony Russo, the cafe owner, rushed over, his face taut with tension. Ethan thrust a finger toward Maya, his voice a sharp command. "Fire her, right now. I don't want her anywhere near my daughter. Do you understand me?" Carlos began to interject, but the billionaire silenced him with a wave. "Do it." Maya stood tall, her resolve unyielding. "If you want me gone, I'll go, but she doesn't deserve to grow up believing everyone who looks like me is dangerous." Ethan remained silent, his focus shifting back to his daughter, Grace Carter, a small 9-year-old, frozen in the corner booth. Maya carefully untied her apron, folding it with precision on the counter, her hands instinctively gathering the last cups and plates from a nearby table. She felt the weight of the stairs on her back, the whispers swirling around her like a storm. She urged herself to keep moving, to push through the door and never look back. Then, through the expansive front window, she spotted Grace Carter on the sidewalk. The girl crouched low, tracing delicate lines on the pavement with a piece of chalk she must have retrieved from her coat pocket. The street beyond bustled with activity, taxis and delivery vans darting past under the midday sun. A knot tightened in Maya's stomach. The child was perilously close to the curb. Before she could shout a warning, Grace Carter stood up, stepping toward the street's edge, her attention caught by something across the way. Maya's instincts kicked in, her body reacting before her mind could catch up. She dropped the tray, cups clattering to the ground, and dashed out the door. Time seemed to stretch as a delivery van careened around the corner, its brakes howling against the slick asphalt. Grace Carter stood frozen in the middle of the lane, eyes wide, like a deer caught in headlights. Maya's arms enveloped her just in time. She twisted her body, shielding the child, and rolled them both toward the curb. The van skidded past, missing them by mere inches. Ethan burst out of the cafe seconds later, breath ragged, eyes locked on his daughter, Grace Carter. He knelt, running his hands over her shoulders, checking for injuries. Grace clung to Maya, refusing to let go. Maya's pulse thundered in her ears, yet she met Ethan's gaze, her own eyes steady. She's fine, scared but fine. Grace pulled back just enough to sign a single word to her father, safe. Then she looked at Maya and signed, thank you. Ethan's jaw worked as if he wanted to speak, but couldn't. The broom lay abandoned inside the cafe, and his face, so rigid with contempt just moments ago, softened into something almost unguarded. He cleared his throat, still holding Grace close. I owe you an apology for what I said, for what I did. Maya glanced toward the window, where patrons still watched, some looking uneasy now. An apology doesn't erase everything. Mr. Cole, no, he admitted, it doesn't, but I can try to make it right. Grace Carter's small hand slid into Maya's. I misjudged you. Badly. Ethan said simply, I saw you with her and thought. I let fear decide what was true. That was wrong, he straightened. If you're willing, I'd like to offer you a job, a better one. Somewhere you won't have to take that from anyone, least of all me. Maya hesitated. Why? Because my daughter smiled today for the first time in 2 years, Ethan said. And you're the reason. She looked down at Grace Carter, then back at Ethan. We'll see, she said quietly, as they walked back toward the cafe. The bell over the door rang a small, ordinary sound. But to Maya, it felt like crossing into different territory entirely. Somewhere behind them, the broom still lay on the floor and used. Unwanted, and maybe, just maybe, so did the man who had picked it up. The air in Harlem Beans felt heavier when they stepped back inside. Conversations attempted to pick up again, yet the cadence felt disjointed, akin to a melody played a fraction too slowly. The same white patrons who had once whispered venom about Maya now averted their gazes, suddenly engrossed in their coffee cups. Maya sensed it all, every furtive glance, every awkward shift. Grace Carter still clasped her hand, and for that fleeting moment, it was the sole anchor she required. Tony Russo, the cafe owner, lingered behind the counter, his thick brows furrowed as he shifted his gaze between Maya and Ethan. You all right? He inquired softly. I'm fine, she replied, her words courteous and instinctive, yet her shoulders remained taut from the earlier confrontation. Ethan cleared his throat and took a step closer. Carlos, I might have been mistaken earlier. His voice resonated loudly enough for half the room to catch, deliberate in its intent. Maya had saved my daughter's life, and that warranted acknowledgement. Carlos cast a glance at Maya, a question flickering in his eyes, to which she responded with a subtle nod, not out of a need for Ethan's validation, but to ensure that pride wouldn't disrupt the delicate peace that Grace Carter seemed to yearn for. I want to discuss something, Ethan pressed on. Not here, if you're willing. Maya's initial instinct was to decline. A man capable of public humiliation had no right to set the terms of their dialogue. Yet, as Grace Carter's fingers tightened around hers, Maya recognized the silent plea in the girl's eyes, clear and compelling. All right, Maya finally conceded, 5 minutes. They settled at a corner table, Grace Carter positioned between them. Ethan's gaze softened as he looked at his daughter, but when it shifted back to Maya, it became steadier, almost cautious. I run a technology firm, he began. We develop communication tools, voice recognition, AI translation, things meant to help people connect. But I have a problem at home that all the tech in the world can't fix. Grace Carter, Maya said quietly. He nodded. She hasn't spoken since the accident that took her mother. Therapists, speech pathologists, none of it has worked. And today, for the first time in 2 years, I saw her smile. Because you spoke her language. Maya leaned back. And you want me to, what? Be her tutor? Not just a tutor, Ethan replied. I want you to work with her every day, teach her, guide her. Whatever you did in those few minutes, I want more of it. Maya's laugh was short and humorless. That's a generous offer for someone you called filthy less than an hour ago. His jaw tightened. I deserve that and worse. I can't take back my words, but I can change what I do next. He paused. I'll pay you well. You'd have your own space, resources, complete authority over her program. Maya studied him. The billionaire mask was still there, but she saw cracks, regret, uncertainty. It wasn't enough to erase the sting of his earlier attack, but it was something. Why me? She asked. Because you're the first person who's reached her in years, he said simply. And because I trust my daughter's instincts more than I trust my own right now. Grace Carter reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the piece of chalk she'd been playing with outside. She held it out to Maya, who took it gently. In the child's eyes, there was no judgment, no class divide, just quiet hope. Maya exhaled slowly. I'll think about it. Ethan nodded, as if he'd expected nothing more. I'll send you my number. You can call if you decide. They rose from the table. The room seemed to breathe again as Ethan and Grace Carter left. The door swinging shut behind them. Carlos approached, arms crossed. You going to take him up on it? Maya shrugged. Haven't decided. Could change your life, Carlos said. Then after a pause, could also make it harder. She gave a wry smile. Story of my life. That night, Maya walked home through the steady drizzle that coated the streets of Queens, New York. Streetlights smeared gold across the wet pavement. She thought about the broom's sting on her arms, the whispers from the cafe, the van's brakes screaming, and she thought about Grace Carter's small hand in hers, the weight of the chalk pressed into her palm. Her apartment was small but warm. A second-floor walk-up above a laundromat. She kicked off her shoes, hung her damp coat, and made tea. The steam curled upward as she sat at the little kitchen table, staring at the chalk. Her phone buzzed a message from an unknown number. Nathan Carter, thank you again. Whatever you decide, I'm grateful. Maya stared at it for a long moment before setting the phone face down. She had no intention of replying tonight. 2 days passed before she heard from him again. But this time, it wasn't a text. It was a knock at her door. When she opened it, Ethan stood there, Grace Carter by his side holding a sketch pad. Rain streaked his overcoat. The air smelled faintly of damp wool. Grace Carter flipped the pad open, showing a drawing, 2 stick figures holding hands. One tall with short hair, one with a bun. Between them was a chalk heart. Maya shifted her gaze from the page to Ethan. I drew this morning, he said quietly. She wanted to bring it to you. Grace Carter handed her the drawing and then stepped back, observing her expression. Maya felt the last remnants of her resistance begin to fade. She crouched down to meet Grace Carter's gaze. You're very talented, she said, signing the words as she spoke. Grace Carter offered a small, genuine smile and nodded. Ethan cleared his throat. I know I'm asking a lot, but I promise you'll have my respect and my protection. Protection from what? Maya asked, standing, his gaze momentarily diverted from those who wished she would never smile again. You could see how swiftly rumors ignited in my world, spreading faster and cutting deeper than any blade. Maya scrutinized him for what felt like an eternity, the rain softly tapping against the fire escape outside. At last, she spoke. I'll try, but if you ever address me again as you did in that cafe, it's over. Do you understand? I understand, he said. Grace Carter reached for her hand once more, and Maya allowed her to take it. A gesture that marked the first time in years. Maya felt a stirring sense of purpose, not merely due to the billionaire at her door, but because of the little girl beside him, her small hand clasped in a way that suggested a destined connection. Deep within, Maya understood that accepting this job would not only transform Grace Carter's life, but her own as well. The coal estate, perched on the northern edge of Greenwich, Connecticut, lay hidden behind tall wrought iron gates and a winding half-mile driveway. It was the sort of property that compelled passers-by to slow their cars, not solely for its vastness, though it was indeed enormous, but for the aura of wealth that seemed to leap from its very stones. The facade shimmered in pale gold under the morning sun, framed by meticulously trimmed hedges and a sprawling lawn that resembled a golf course more than a mere yard. Maya settled into the back seat of the town car that Ethan had arranged for her hands resting neatly in her lap as she fought the urge to gaze at the sprawling mansion that loomed ahead. She had traversed the halls of opulent homes before, but always through the service entrance, burdened with trays or cleaning supplies. This time, however, she was poised to make her entrance at the front door. When the car came to a halt, a butler in his mid-50s, with white hair and a posture as rigid as a soldier's, opened the door. "Miss Williams," he intoned, his voice a blend of politeness and detachment. "This way, please." As she stepped out, she smoothed the fabric of her carefully chosen navy dress, professional yet comfortable, a stark contrast to the café uniform that had defined her for years. The butler guided her through a grand foyer, where a crystal chandelier cast shimmering light onto the marble floor, and a sweeping staircase ascended gracefully like a ribbon. Ethan appeared from a hallway to the left, dressed in a dark suit even though it was only 9 in the morning. Grace Carter peeked out from behind him, clutching her sketch pad. "Morning," Ethan said. "Come on, I'll show you the study where you'll be working." The study was large but warm, sunlight streaming through tall windows that overlooked the back garden. A round table sat in the center with paper, markers, and a small laptop already set up. Shelves lined the walls, filled with books and puzzles. Grace Carter slipped into the room ahead of them and began arranging markers by color. Maya followed, feeling the quiet tension in the space like a stage just before the curtain rose. They began simply. Maya introduced herself again in sign, exaggerating the shape so Grace Carter could see clearly. The girl watched closely, then mirrored the movements. They signed colors, animals, and simple actions. Maya's voice soft but steady as she spoke each word aloud. Grace Carter smiled once, or twice, especially when Maya pretended to get a sign wrong, and looked comically confused. But the moment was interrupted by the sound of a sharp voice from the doorway. "Mr. Cole." A woman in her early 40s stood there, impeccably dressed in a cream blazer and silk blouse. Her blonde hair was pulled into a sleek twist, and the expression on her face could have sliced glass. "This is Patricia Pat Lewis," Ethan said to Maya, "my chief of household staff." Patricia Pat Lewis's gaze slid over Maya, pausing just long enough to communicate disapproval. "A quick question about the new arrangement. Will Miss Williams be using the main entrance daily?" Ethan's brow tightened. "Yes." Patricia Pat Lewis's smile was thin. "Noted." She left without another word, her heels clicking down the hall. Maya didn't miss the look she had seen it before, the polite mask that barely concealed the thought. "You don't belong here." She returned to Grace Carter, refusing to let Patricia Pat Lewis's presence throw her off. The morning passed in quiet focus. They practiced the alphabet, then simple sentences. Grace Carter drew pictures to match the words they signed, holding them up proudly. By lunchtime, the girl had relaxed enough to giggle. When Maya made a joke about the house being so big they might need GPS to find the kitchen, in the dining room, Ethan joined them for a light meal: grilled chicken, salad, and warm rolls. He watched the easy back and forth between Maya and Grace Carter, and something in his posture softened. "You're good with her," he said once Grace Carter had gone to fetch her sketchpad. Maya sipped her water. "Kids don't care about your resume. They care if you see them." Ethan nodded. But before he could respond, Patricia Pat Lewis reappeared, leaning toward him to murmur something. He frowned, excused himself, and followed her out. Left alone, Maya stacked the plates. From the hallway came muffled voices: Patricia Pat Lewis's sharp and clipped, Ethan's lower and measured. She caught fragments, not appropriate. Media attention, appearances matter. When Ethan returned, his jaw was tight. He changed the subject, asking Maya about her schedule preferences. But the shadow from that conversation lingered in his eyes. That afternoon, they moved outside to the garden. Grace Carter seemed freer there, racing along the stone path to show Maya a cluster of they practiced signs for flower, tree, and sky. The crisp autumn air lifting the girl's hair from her shoulders, but peace was short-lived. A man in a tailored sports coat strolled across the lawn toward them. Sunglasses pushed up in his hair, his smile was charming, but his eyes were calculating. Ethan's new hire, I presume, he said. I'm Michael Grant, old friend of the family. Maya shook his hand. Olivia Brooks. Daniel's gaze flicked to Grace Carter, then back to her. Interesting choice for a tutor, not what I'd expect in this neighborhood. Maya met his look without flinching. Maybe you should expand your expectations, he chuckled. But it didn't reach his eyes. Fair enough. We'll see how long you last. Grace Carter stepped closer to Maya, a silent show of loyalty. Daniel gave a parting nod and wandered back toward the house. By the time the sun dipped low, Maya was packing her bag. Ethan walked her to the door. Ignore Daniel, he said. He likes to test people. Testing's one thing. Maya replied. Prejudging is another. Ethan gave a rueful smile. You're going to find a lot of both here, he hesitated. But I hope you'll stick around anyway. Outside, the air smelled faintly of wood smoke. As the gates swung open for her, Maya looked back at the sprawling house. Somewhere inside, Grace Carter was probably drawing again, maybe adding a new figure to the stick figure world she'd shown Maya. Maya wasn't sure yet if she could trust Ethan or anyone in his circle, but she knew one thing. Grace Carter needed her. And for now, that was reason enough to walk back through those gates again tomorrow, because the world inside that estate was dangerous in its own quiet way, and Maya had no intention of being caught off guard. Not here, not again. The second morning began with a thin mist hanging over the estate. Dew clung to the hedges and the marble steps, making them glisten as Maya walked up to the front door. She had decided to take the bus, and then walk the final stretch, rather than accept the town car Ethan had offered. She wanted to arrive on her own terms. Patricia, Pat, Lewis opened the door before Maya could knock. You're early, she said, her tone neutral but her eyes calculating. Habit, Maya replied simply. Stepping past her into the foyer, Grace Carter appeared from the hallway. Her face lighting up, she signed a quick, "Good morning," and Maya returned it with a smile. The girl tugged at her sleeve, pulling her toward the study before anyone else could intercept them. Today's lesson began with storytelling. Maya laid out a stack of picture cards, animals, objects, and scenes, and encouraged Grace Carter to create a story by arranging them. Grace Carter's small hands moved quickly, signing words to match her chosen sequence. Dog, ball, tree, happy. It was simple, but her expression when she completed it was pure joy. They were halfway through a second story when the muffled sound of voices drifted from the hallway. Ethan's voice was low, but another, sharper, faster cut through. Maya recognized Daniel's cadence even before she caught the words. Don't see why you're so invested. She's not from our circle, Ethan. This could blow up in your face. I'm invested because Grace Carter's making progress. Ethan replied, That's all that matters. You say that now, but the press is hungry for anything. They see a black woman working in your home. Suddenly close to your daughter, people start making assumptions. You've been in this game long enough to know how fast a narrative can turn. There was a pause. Then Ethan's voice again, clipped. I don't care about their assumptions. You should. Daniel shot back. Investors do. Maya kept her eyes on Grace Carter, who was unaware of the exchange, but the words burrowed deep. She had been here less than a week and already felt the weight of being discussed like a liability behind closed doors. Later that morning, Ethan joined them for a brief session. Grace Carter eagerly showed him the story she had built, her hands moving with confidence. He watched closely, smiling in a way that softened his whole face. That's wonderful, Grace Carter, he said. You're doing so well. When Grace Carter left to wash her hands before lunch, Ethan turned to Maya. Ignore Daniel. He likes to stir the pot. Maya met his gaze. It's not Daniel I'm worried about. It's everyone who nods along with him. Ethan's mouth pressed into a thin line. I told you before, you have my protection. Protection doesn't erase perception, Maya said. And perception can ruin people like me faster than truth can save them. His eyes narrowed slightly. not in anger, but in thought. Point taken. Lunch was a quieter affair. Patricia, Pat, Lewis had orchestrated their meal in the sunroom, where tall glass panels invited the soft light to dance within. She lingered by the doorway, feigning interest in a stack of linens while her ears remained attuned to every utterance. Maya, however, chose to disregard her presence, channeling her energy into engaging Grace Carter with playful quips and gentle signs. After the meal, they strolled through the garden, a cool breeze whispering through the leaves, carrying the delicate aroma of pine from the nearby woods. Grace Carter animatedly pointed to a squirrel darting across the grass, signing with a quick wit that made Maya chuckle as she responded in kind, affirming the speed of their little friend. Midway down the path, a figure emerged from behind the hedge, a woman unfamiliar to Maya, clad in upscale sportswear and clutching a yoga mat. In her 30s, with pronounced cheekbones and a smile that felt more like a mask, she assessed Maya with a scrutinizing gaze. "You must be the new tutor," the woman remarked, introducing herself as Vanessa Grant, Daniel's wife. Maya offered her hand. Olivia Brooks. Lila's grip was light, but her gaze stayed locked on Maya's face, searching for something. "Well, I do hope you're comfortable here. The Cole household can be very particular about who it lets in." Grace Carter stepped closer to Maya again, her hand brushing against Maya's. "I'm comfortable when Grace Carter's happy," Maya said. Lila's smile tilted. "Happiness is a temporary thing in this world. I'd be careful not to get too attached." She walked away without waiting for a response, leaving behind a faint trace of expensive perfume. That night, back in her apartment, Maya sat at her small kitchen table with the chalk Grace Carter had given her, resting beside a cup of tea. She thought about Lila's warning, Daniel's whispers, Patricia, Pat, Lewis's watchful eyes. The house was beautiful. Yes, but beauty here seemed to come with sharp edges. Her phone buzzed with a message from Ethan. Grace Carter asked if you could stay longer tomorrow. "Only if you're okay with it." Maya typed back, "Yes." Then, after a pause, added, "We'll need more picture cards. She's telling bigger stories." The next day began the same, but the rhythm shifted when Maya arrived to find Grace Carter waiting at the gate. Bouncing on her toes, the guard on duty, a tall man in a crisp uniform, gave Maya a once-over before unlocking it. Inside, Grace Carter signed excitedly about a dream she'd had, something about a big tree, a swing, and a bird that could talk. Maya encouraged her to draw it out before they began their lesson. But mid-morning, Patricia, Pat, Lewis interrupted. "Mr. 12, Cole needs to see you in his office, Miss Williams." Maya followed her through a long corridor lined with paintings of people who looked like they had never known what it was to be questioned. Ethan was behind a massive desk, leaning forward with his elbows on the polished wood. "Close the door," he said. She did. "I'm not going to sugarcoat this," he began. "Daniel's been talking to the board members of one of my companies. He's suggesting that your presence here could be spun the wrong way. If someone wanted to hurt me professionally." Maya crossed her arms. "So what does that mean for me?" "It means I need you to decide if you can handle the pressure. Because if you stay, there will be people trying to undermine you and, by extension, me. They'll dig into your past, twist things, make you question why you're here." Maya held his gaze. "I've dealt with worse, but I'm not here for them. I'm here for Grace Carter." "Ah." Something in Ethan's expression eased, just slightly. "Then we'll face it together." As she left the office, Maya knew the days ahead wouldn't be about just teaching Grace Carter signs or building stories. They would be about surviving a war she hadn't signed up for, one fought with whispers, influence, and the quiet, relentless power of perception. And she was ready, or at least, she would be. The next week began under a sky the color of tarnished silver, the kind of morning that made the air feel heavier than it should. Maya stepped off the bus and began the walk to the estate, her thoughts already on the day's lesson plan for Grace Carter. She wanted to introduce more complex sentences and sign, moving from single words into connected thoughts. The child had been quick to pick up vocabulary, but it was time to give her the tools to express more. At the gate, the uniformed guard gave her a nod, but didn't open it immediately. "Hold up a second, Miss Williams," he said, speaking into his earpiece. After a pause, the gate slid open, Patricia, Pat. Lewis wanted me to confirm you were on schedule. Maya didn't reply. She knew exactly what that meant. Another subtle reminder that her presence here wasn't assumed or permanent. Inside, Grace Carter was waiting at the top of the marble steps, bouncing slightly on her heels. She signed happy in today, her grin widening when Maya returned the gesture. The girl grabbed her hand and led her straight to the study without a word, as if she'd been saving her. Excitement all morning. They began with a simple exercise, Grace Carter drawing scenes from her favorite memory, then signing a story about them. Maya watched as Grace Carter sketched a park, a swing set, and a tall figure beside her. Maya recognized herself instantly from the bun and long skirt. When Grace Carter signed safe, Maya felt an unexpected tightness in her chest. But their quiet focus was broken by the sound of approaching footsteps, quick, deliberate. Patricia, Pat, Lewis appeared in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Cole wants to see you both in the dining room," she said. Now, in the dining room, Ethan was not alone. Seated across from him was a man Maya hadn't seen before, mid-40s, with the sharp, calculated stillness of someone used to negotiating power in boardrooms. "This is Richard Rick Stone," Ethan said when they entered. "He's a major investor in one of my companies." Klein's gaze flicked to Maya, lingering just a second too long. "I've heard quite a bit about you," he said, his tone deceptively polite. "I hope it's from someone who actually knows me," Maya replied evenly. Klein smiled, but it was thin. "In business, perception matters as much as truth. You must understand that your position here raises certain questions." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Robert." "No, it's fine," Maya cut in, her voice calm. "What questions?" Klein folded his hands. "Whether this arrangement is wise, whether it puts Ethan in a vulnerable position publicly, whether a black woman has any business being in a house like this." Maya finished for him. The room went still. Klein's smile froze in place, but his eyes hardened. "I wouldn't phrase it like that." "But that's what you mean," Maya said. She kept her tone even, but every word carried weight. "I'm here because I'm helping Grace Carter. If that makes anyone uncomfortable, that's their problem, not mine." Grace Carter, sensing the tension, slid her hand into Maya's and held on tightly. Ethan shattered the stillness, addressing Robert with a firm tone. "I appreciate your investment, but I will not tolerate you questioning my judgment in my own home." Maya remains. Klein's gaze sharpened, yet he chose silence, rising instead to button his jacket and exit without extending a hand. Once he departed, Ethan released a slow breath. "You didn't have to confront that directly," he remarked. "Yes, I did," Maya replied, "for he isn't the only one harboring those thoughts, and ignoring it won't erase its presence." Ethan regarded her for a prolonged moment before conceding. "Then we shall face it head on." Later that afternoon, Maya escorted Grace Carter outside for their lesson, the autumn air invigorating, the sky now clearer as the morning clouds dispersed. Grace practiced signing complete sentences. "I like the garden, the flowers are pretty, the sky is blue." Midway through, Maya caught a flicker of movement near the back hedges. Michael Grant leaned casually against the stone wall, watching them. When Maya met his eyes, he smiled like they shared some private joke. "Enjoying the view?" she called. Daniel strolled over, hands in his pockets. "I just find it fascinating," he said. "You really believe you can survive here?" "I'm not here to survive," Maya replied. "I'm here to help Grace Carter." He chuckled. "That's noble. But this place chews people up, especially outsiders. You might want to start planning your exit now before someone plans it for you." Grace Carter had stopped signing, her eyes moving between them. Maya crouched to meet her gaze and signed "ignore him," earning a small conspiratorial smile from the girl. Daniel gave a mock salute and wandered off, but Maya could feel his eyes still on them long after he disappeared behind the hedges. That evening, as Maya gathered her things to leave, Patricia, Pat, Lewis intercepted her at the foyer. "A word of advice," she said, her voice low. "You may have Mr. Cole's favor now, but favor changes quickly." Maya met her gaze. "I'm not here for his favor. I'm here for Grace Carter." "Patricia, Pat." Lewis's lips curved in a knowing smile. "Yes, that's what everyone says at first." On the bus ride home, Maya stared out the window at the blur of city lights, her mind replaying the day. She was beginning to understand that the hostility she faced here wasn't random. It was strategic. Every look, every comment, every whispered warning was meant to push her toward one conclusion: she didn't belong. But the more they tried to convince her of that, the more she knew she had to stay, because this wasn't just about Grace Carter learning to sign anymore. It was about drawing a line in the sand, and Maya was ready to stand on her side of it, no matter how hard the waves tried to wash it away. By the end of the week, the tension in the quieter, but more deliberate, like a current running just beneath the surface. Maya could feel it in the way conversations paused when she walked into a room, in the glances that passed between Patricia, Pat, Lewis, and the other staff, and in the unusual amount of time Daniel seemed to spend at the house. It was Friday afternoon when Ethan approached her in the study. Grace Carter was busy coloring a picture of a bird with outstretched wings, humming softly under her breath. Ethan's voice was low enough not to disturb her. "I need you to join us for dinner tonight," he said. Maya looked up from the sentence cards she'd been sorting. "Us, myself, Grace Carter, and a few guests," Ethan replied. "Investors, old friends. It's casual, but I'd like them to see you with Grace Carter." Maya didn't miss the subtext. He wants to prove something. "And what exactly do you want them to see?" "That you're part of this household," he said without hesitation. "That Grace Carter's progress isn't just real, it's happening because of you." She hesitated. "You know they'll talk." "They already are," Ethan said. "Let's give them something worth talking about," Maya agreed, though not without reservations. That evening, she returned to the estate in a simple but elegant navy dress, her hair pinned back neatly. Grace Carter greeted her in the foyer, wearing a pale yellow dress that made her look like a drop of sunshine. The girl signed pretty to Maya with a shy smile. In the dining room, a long polished table gleamed under soft golden light. 6 guests were already seated, 3 men and 3 women, all dressed in the understated wealth of tailored suits and silk blouses. Daniel sat near the end of the table, his wife Lila beside him. Ethan introduced Maya as Grace Carter's tutor and the reason for her renewed smile. Polite applause followed, though not all of it felt genuine. Maya settled into her seat beside Grace Carter, directly across from Daniel, whose grin danced on the edge of mockery. Dinner commenced smoothly, the air filled with discussions of business ventures, art exhibitions, and upcoming charity galas. Grace Carter remained engaged, occasionally signing a word or two to Maya, who responded with gentle encouragement. However, midway through the main course, Daniel leaned forward, his voice slicing through the ambient chatter. "So, Maya," he began, "tell us how you ended up here. Seems like quite a leap from. Where was it again?" Maya met his gaze without flinching. "Queens," she replied. "New York," she said, "and it's not a leap when you follow the work you care about." Lila smirked faintly, swirling her wine. "And what was that work before this?" Maya replied evenly. "I was a server at Harlem Beans Café." One of the other women at the table, a sharp-featured brunette named Clarissa, tilted her head. "And now you're living and working in Greenwich, Connecticut? That's quite the change in scenery." Grace Carter shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Maya reached under the table, giving the girl's hand a reassuring squeeze. "Yes," she said, "it is, but my work is the same, making sure people feel seen and understood. Grace Carter just happens to be my student now." Daniel smiled like a man who'd been waiting for this moment. "And you don't see the optics issue. The media loves a good story about a wealthy man bringing someone in from the other side of the tracks. You've seen the headlines before. They can twist anything." Ethan set down his fork with deliberate calm. "Daniel," but Maya spoke before he could finish. "You're right," she said. "They can twist anything, which is why I'm not here for them. I'm here for her." She nodded toward Grace Carter, who was now watching her intently. "And that's all the explanation anyone needs." The room was quiet for a beat too long before conversation resumed in stilted bursts. The undercurrent was still there, but Maya didn't care. She could feel Grace Carter's eyes on her, and the trust in them was worth more than any investor's approval. After dinner, as guests drifted toward the sitting room for coffee, Maya excused herself to help Grace Carter change into her pajamas. in the hallway outside the girl's bedroom. Ethan stopped her. "You handled that better than I would have," he said. "I wasn't talking to them," Maya replied. "I was talking to her." Ethan nodded, his gaze lingering on her for a moment. "That's why you're here." Later, as Maya was preparing to leave, she passed the open doorway of the sitting room and caught her name in the air. She paused just out of sight. "She's poised, I'll give her that," Clarissa was saying, "but it still looks like a PR risk." "She's not here for PR," Ethan replied. "She's here because Grace Carter needs her," Daniel's voice followed, cool and amused. "Maybe, but need is one thing, Ethan. Optics are another. And in this world, optics always win." Maya slipped away quietly, the words following her out into the cool night air. On the drive back to Queens, New York, she thought about the unspoken challenge in Daniel's voice, about Lila's smirk, about the way Patricia Pat Lewis still hovered like a shadow. This wasn't just about teaching anymore. It was a test of her patience, her resilience, and her place here. As the city lights came into view, Maya made herself a silent promise. She would not be pushed out, not by whispers, not by politics, and certainly not by people who had already decided what she was worth. If they wanted a war of perception, she was ready to fight it on her own terms. And in that fight, Grace Carter's progress and her trust would be the only victory that mattered. The following Monday began with a storm. Rain lashed against the bus windows as Maya made her way to Greenwich, Connecticut, the streets of Midtown New York City slick with silver reflections. She stepped off at her stop, tightening her coat around her, and began the walk toward the estate. Even before she reached the gate, she sensed something was off. Two unfamiliar SUVs were parked just outside, their hazard lights blinking in the gray morning. A man with a camera leaned against one of them, pretending to check his phone but glancing up as she approached. Inside, Patricia Pat Lewis was waiting. "You should know," she said in her clipped tone. "The press has been sniffing around since Saturday. Someone leaked a photo from Friday's dinner." Maya stopped in her tracks. "What photo?" Patricia Pat Lewis's mouth twitched in something between a smirk and a warning. "The one where you're sitting beside Grace Carter, smiling like you own the place. Apparently, it's making rounds online with all sorts of commentary." Maya didn't ask for details. She could imagine them. Still, she pushed past Patricia Pat Lewis, determined not to let it shake her before she saw Grace Carter. The girl was in the study, sitting cross-legged on the rug, flipping through a picture book. When she saw Maya, her face lit up and she signed "Happy today." Maya nodded, forcing a smile. "Always, when I'm here with you." They settled into their lesson, working on signs for feelings: angry, proud, worried, excited. Grace Carter took to it quickly, acting out each expression dramatically, making Maya laugh despite the knot in her stomach. But the quiet didn't last. Midway through the session, Ethan entered, holding his phone in one hand and a folded newspaper in the other. His face was unreadable. "Maya, can we talk?" In the hallway, he handed her the paper. The headline wasn't subtle: "Billionaire Cole's Mystery Woman, from Coffee Shop to Carter Estate, Greenwich, Connecticut." Beneath it, a grainy photo from Friday's dinner. Maya leaning toward Grace Carter, both smiling, was paired with a smaller shot clearly lifted from the cafe's website, showing Maya in her old uniform. "They're speculating everything from a secret romance to some charity project." Ethan said, "It's garbage, but it's getting attention." Maya looked up from the paper. "And you're telling me because it's going to get worse before it dies down," he said. "And because Daniel's already using it to argue you should be removed." Her stomach tightened, but her voice stayed steady. "And what do you think?" Ethan met her eyes. "I think Grace Carter's progress is worth more than their gossip, but I also think you should be prepared. They'll dig for more." The rest of the morning passed under a shadow. Even Grace Carter, sensitive to the change in mood, was quieter than usual. When Maya left for lunch, she passed two more unfamiliar faces on the sidewalk outside the gate, both with cameras, both pretending to be just passing through. After lunch, Ethan asked her to join him in his office. Daniel was there, lounging in a leather chair, his posture radiating smug satisfaction. Well, Daniel said, "Quite the celebrity, aren't you? You've got half the internet talking about you." Maya didn't sit. I'm not here to be talked about. I'm here to work, Daniel chuckled. Work? You call this work? You're playing nanny to a girl who doesn't need pity. That's enough. Ethan cut in, his voice sharp. Grace Carter needs Maya, and she's staying. Daniel's smile thinned. Fine. But when the board starts questioning your judgment, don't say I didn't warn you. Maya turned to leave, but Daniel's voice followed her. You might think you can handle the spotlight, Miss Williams, but I've seen it ruin people tougher than you. That night, back in her apartment, Maya finally looked at the online articles. Some were harmless, but others were laced with the kind of venom she knew all too well. Comments about her race, her background, her supposed motives. She scrolled until her chest felt tight, then closed the laptop. She was halfway through making tea when her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. They're going to come after you harder. Walk away while you can. Maya stared at the screen, her grip tightening. There was no name, but she didn't need one. She had a feeling she knew exactly who it was from. The next morning, she arrived at the estate to find Grace Carter waiting by the window, her sketchpad open. She ran to Maya, showing her a drawing of two stick figures, one tall, one short, standing together against a backdrop of swirling lines that looked like storm clouds. Above them, Grace Carter had scrawled one word in large block letters, safe. Maya felt the sting in her eyes before she could stop it. She knelt, signing safe back to her, then added together. Grace Carter grinned and hugged her so tightly Maya could feel the girl's small heartbeat against her own. Right then, she knew that whatever storm was coming, she wasn't going anywhere. They could whisper, they could threaten, they could dig up every scrap of her past, but as long as Grace Carter needed her, she would stand her ground. If they wanted to fight, they had just found someone who wouldn't back down. And this time, she was ready to take the hits and keep standing. 2 days after the story broke, Ethan announced he would be taking Grace Carter to the city for the afternoon, and he wanted Maya to come along. Fresh air, he said, and maybe a change of scenery will help us all breathe. Maya suspected it was also a chance to show the world on his terms that there was nothing shameful about her presence in Grace Carter's life. The black SUV rolled through Golden Gate Park, San Francisco, CA's entrance just after noon. Autumn leaves crunched underfoot as they walked, a blanket of orange and gold softening the paths. Grace Carter was dressed in a pale pink coat, clutching Maya's hand with the ease of a child who no longer saw her as anything but safe. Ethan trailed just behind them, speaking quietly on the phone. For a while, it was peaceful. Maya helped Grace Carter feed ducks near the pond, teaching her the signs for duck, water, and hungry. Grace Carter laughed, tossing breadcrumbs into the ripples. But when Maya glanced up, she noticed a man leaning against a lamppost with a camera half hidden under his jacket. A second figure appeared near the playground entrance. Phone raised discreetly. Maya's instincts sharpened. She recognized the way they weren't watching the park, they were watching her. She led Grace Carter back toward Ethan. We've got company, she murmured. Ethan followed her gaze. Paparazzi, he muttered. Ignore them. But ignoring them wasn't an option for long. As they moved toward the carousel, one of the men stepped directly into their path. Olivia Brooks, he called, his voice carrying. Care to comment on your relationship with Mr. Cole? Before Maya could answer, another voice came from behind her, sharp, cold, and far too familiar. Oh, I'm sure she'd love to comment. Michael Grant emerged from the crowd, Lila at his side, both dressed in athleisure like they'd just finished a casual stroll. His smirk was razor thin. Ethan's jaw tightened. Daniel, what the hell are you doing here? Enjoying the park, Daniel said smoothly, and apparently running into an old friend. Though from the looks of it, she's the newest headline act. Grace Carter clung closer to Maya, her small hand gripping tight. Maya bent slightly, signing it's okay, but the girl's wide eyes betrayed her unease. The nearest photographer clicked a burst of shots. Lila's voice was honeyed with malice. Smile. Maya, the public loves a good redemption arc, or a scandal, depending on how it's spun. Maya straightened. Grace Carter's not part of your games. Back off. Daniel's eyes flicked to the cameras. Everything's a game, Miss Williams, and the sooner you learn the rules, the better chance you have of surviving. Ethan stepped forward, positioning himself between Daniel and the girls. Go find someone else to provoke. We're done here." But as they moved to leave, one of the photographers shouted, "Maya, is it true you're planning to marry into the Cole family?" The question was bait, but it sent a ripple through the nearby crowd. Before Maya could react, Grace Carter let go of her hand and stepped backward toward the edge of the carousel platform. Startled by the sudden shouts, the crowd shifted, and in the next instant, Grace Carter stumbled off the curb into the path of a cyclist speeding by. Maya didn't think. She lunged forward, catching Grace Carter around the waist and pulling her back just as the bike whizzed past, the rider cursing loudly. Grace Carter buried her face in Maya's shoulder, trembling. The cameras clicked like a swarm of insects in every frame. Maya's arms were wrapped protectively around Grace Carter, her own face set in fierce determination. Ethan's expression was darker than storm clouds. "Enough," he snapped at the photographers. "We're leaving." They made their way back to the SUV in tense silence, the click of cameras trailing them until the doors shut. Inside, Ethan turned to Maya. "You just saved her life." "Again, I didn't think," Maya said quietly. "I just acted." From her seat, Grace Carter signed "Thank you" and "Safe." Maya smiled faintly, squeezing her hand. Back at the estate, Ethan pulled her aside before she could leave. "Today changes things," he said. "They'll still talk, but now they'll have to talk about what you did. I'll make sure that's the story that spreads." Maya shook her head. "I don't care what they say about me. I care about what she feels when she's with me. And today, she felt safe. That's all that matters." Ethan's gaze softened. "That's why you matter." Later that night, the news cycle picked up the incident. Headlines showed the photos. Cole's controversial tutor saves his daughter from accident in park. Some outlets framed it as heroism, others as a calculated performance. Maya didn't read them all, but she saw the one photo Grace Carter had drawn earlier that week, two figures under storm clouds posted on the fridge in the kitchen. This time, the clouds didn't feel so close. And for the first time since she'd stepped into this world, Maya felt like she might just be able to weather the storm until it broke. The morning after the park incident, Maya arrived at the estate earlier than usual. The air was cold enough to see her breath, and the sun was still low, casting long shadows across the driveway. She had barely stepped inside when she felt a shift in the atmosphere, like the house itself was holding its breath. Patricia Pat Lewis was at the front desk, flipping through the day's mail, her eyes flicking up as Maya passed. "Mr. Cole's in the library," she said. "He's been up since 5. Maya found Ethan pacing by the tall windows, a mug of coffee cooling on the desk beside him. He didn't waste time. "They've started digging," he said. "Not just the press, private investigators. Someone's paying them to find anything they can on you." Maya leaned against the doorway. "Let me guess. Daniel." Ethan's silence was answer enough. He rubbed his temple. "I can shut some of it down, but not all. If they find even the smallest thing they can twist, they will. I don't have skeletons in my closet," Maya said firmly. "But if they want to make something up, they will. That's not a fight I can win on their terms. That's why." "You let me handle it," Ethan replied. "You focus on Grace Carter. I'll handle the rest." They were interrupted by the sound of light footsteps. Grace Carter appeared in the doorway, hair still rumpled from sleep. Holding a folded piece of paper, she handed it to Maya and signed "For you." Inside was a crew drawing 2 stick figures, one tall, one small, standing side by side. Above them, Grace Carter had drawn a wall, high and thick, with the words "US" inside and them outside. Maya smiled faintly, tucking the drawing into her bag. "Looks like we're on the same team," she told Ethan. That day's lesson was cut short when Patricia Pat Lewis appeared again, her face tight. "There's someone here asking for you," she told Maya. "Says she's from the cafe where you used to work." Maya's stomach tightened. She followed Patricia Pat Lewis to the foyer, where a young woman in a worn jacket stood wringing her hands. "Jessica Moore." Maya blinked. "What are you doing here? I didn't know where else to go." Jessica Moore said, glancing around nervously. "Reporters came to my apartment this morning. They're asking about you, what you were like at the cafe, who you talked to. If you ever mention Nathan Carter. One of them offered me money." Maya's jaw clenched. "Did you take it?" "Of course not," Jessica Moore said quickly. "But they're not going to stop, and they're digging into me too." My landlord's already asking questions. Ethan appeared behind them. His voice low but firm. We'll make sure you're protected. No one should be harassed for telling the truth. After Jessica Moore left, Maya lingered in the foyer, staring at the heavy double doors. This isn't just about me anymore, she said. They're going after anyone connected to me. Ethan nodded grimly. Then we cut off their angles, every loose end, every rumor. They'll have nothing to use. That evening, as Maya was leaving, she overheard two of the estate staff talking in the service hall, saying she's using the kid to get close to him. One whispered, "First it's dinner, now it's heroics in the park." All too convenient. Maya didn't confront them. She simply kept walking, the words sinking like stones in her stomach. By the time she reached the bus stop, the streetlights were on, and the city felt colder than it had that morning. She didn't sleep well. Her dreams were filled with flashes of camera shutters, Daniel's smirk, and Grace Carter's frightened eyes. When she finally gave up on rest and sat at her kitchen table, the clock read 3:47 a.m. Her phone buzzed. Another unknown number. "You can still walk away before it gets ugly." Maya stared at the message, the steady hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. She deleted it without replying. The next day, she arrived to find Grace Carter waiting with a new drawing. This one of the three of them, Maya, Grace Carter, and Ethan, standing in front of the same wall as before. This time, the wall had a door, and above it Grace Carter had written, "We choose who comes in." Maya felt a swell of pride and something deeper resolve. She knew the storm wasn't over. If anything, it was just beginning. But as long as Grace Carter trusted her, she wasn't going anywhere. That night, a story aired on a local news station. The footage from the park showed Maya pulling Grace Carter out of harm's way, replayed in slow motion. The anchor's voiceover called her a hero, but the panel of experts debated her motives. Was it instinct, or was it a calculated move to cement her place in the Cole household? Maya turned off the television. She didn't need to hear strangers speculate about her heart. She knew the truth. Grace Carter knew the truth, and that was enough for now. But as she sat in the darkened living room, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone, somewhere, was already planning the next move against her. And when it came, she would be ready by Thursday. The whispers had found their way beyond the estate gates and into the polished halls of the Cole family's corporate empire. Ethan's assistant called Maya mid-morning, her tone crisp but urgent. "Mr. Cole requests your presence downtown this afternoon. Board meeting. He says it's important." Maya hesitated. "A board meeting? Why would I?" "He says you'll understand when you get here." The assistant cut in before hanging up. When she arrived at the Cole Tower, the difference in atmosphere was immediate. The marble lobby, usually a place where people glided about with quiet efficiency, now felt like a stage where every glance lingered too long. She was escorted to the top floor, where the boardroom doors loomed like the gates to some private battlefield. Inside, the long glass table was flanked by 10 board members, all in suits, their expressions ranging from polite disinterest to outright suspicion. At the head sat Ethan, his posture rigid, his eyes sharp. Daniel was 2 seats down, wearing the kind of smile that belonged to a man who'd set the trap himself. "Thank you for joining us, Miss Williams," Ethan began, gesturing for her to take the empty seat beside him. "This meeting concerns the ongoing media attention following last week's events." One of the older members, a silver-haired man with a voice like gravel, leaned forward. "We've reviewed the footage, the articles, the speculation. While saving Grace Carter was commendable, the optics have complicated our public image." Ugh. Another member, a woman in a navy skirt suit, interjected, "There are concerns this arrangement could be perceived as inappropriate. The narrative being spun is not favorable." Maya glanced at Ethan, but his eyes stayed on the table. She could feel the heat of Daniel's gaze from down the line. Daniel finally spoke, voice smooth as glass. "We all want what's best for Grace Carter, but when personal decisions start affecting the brand, it's our responsibility to act. The simplest solution would be to create some distance, at least until the noise dies down." Maya's pulse quickened, but she kept her voice steady. "With all due respect, Grace Carter's progress isn't noise. It's real. She's speaking through her hands now, laughing, engaging with the world again. You think that's worth throwing away because someone with a camera made up a story. The silver-haired man narrowed his eyes. This isn't about truth, Miss Williams. It's about perception. Perception moves markets. It shapes deals. Daniel leaned back, satisfied. Exactly. And right now, perception says you're a liability. Ethan finally spoke. His tone clipped. Perception can change, and it will because we're not dismissing Maya. End of discussion. The room went still. A few board members exchanged glances, but none spoke. Daniel's smile faltered. But only for a moment. Very well, he said. But don't expect the press or the investors to be as forgiving. When the meeting adjourned, Ethan walked her to the elevator. I didn't bring you here to humiliate you, he said quietly. I brought you here so they could see. You stand your ground. And you did. They don't care about ground, Maya replied. They care about protecting themselves. That's their problem, Ethan said. Mine is making sure Grace Carter has what she needs. And that means you. Back at the estate that evening, Grace Carter was waiting in the garden. She was sitting cross-legged on the grass, drawing in her sketchbook. When she saw Maya, she jumped up and ran to her. Signing happy you here, Maya smiled. Kneeling to meet her gaze, I'm not going anywhere, she promised. Later, as the sun dipped low and the garden lights came on, Maya stood by the window in her room, watching the shadows lengthen across the lawn. The boardroom had been a warning shot. Daniel wasn't done, and neither were the people willing to use her as a pawn in their power games. Her phone buzzed again, another unknown number. This time, the message was different. Check tomorrow's paper. It's over. She stared at the screen, the words pulsing like a threat. She didn't know what was coming, but she could feel the air tightening around her. And somewhere deep inside, she knew the next move wouldn't just be about her. It would be aimed straight at the bond she had fought to build with Grace Carter, with Ethan, with herself. Whatever it was, it would test everything. And she would have to decide, once and for all, how far she was willing to go to protect the only thing that mattered. The next morning, Maya woke to a knock at her apartment door. She opened it to find Jessica Moore standing there, shivering in the early chill, a folded newspaper clutched in her hand. Her face was pale. You need to see this, Jessica Moore said. Maya took the paper and unfolded it. The headline hit her like a slap. Cole's angel or opportunist, the untold past of Olivia Brooks. Beneath it was a photo from years ago, Maya in her cafe uniform, standing outside a courthouse, head down. The article painted a twisted version of her life, claims that she'd been involved in a workplace dispute, that she'd strategically aligned herself with wealthy patrons, that her connection to Grace Carter was part of a calculated plan. Names of former coworkers were scattered through the piece, along with quotes from anonymous sources, suggesting she was ambitious, manipulative, and dangerous to the Cole family's image. They're calling it an expose, Jessica Moore said quietly. It's everywhere online already. Maya skimmed the text, feeling the familiar ache of injustice tightening in her chest. Most of this isn't even true, she said, and the bits that are there twisted into something ugly. That's what they do, Jessica Moore said, and they won't stop unless someone makes them. Maya didn't have time to reply. Her phone rang. Ethan, stay where you are, he said without greeting. I'm sending a car. The ride to the estate was silent except for the low hum of the engine. When she arrived, Ethan was waiting in the foyer, the same newspaper in his hand, his jaw tight. I've already spoken to our legal team, he said. We can challenge it, but the damage is in the first impression, and right now, that's what people will remember. I didn't do anything wrong, Maya said, her voice sharper than she intended. I know, Ethan said firmly, but Daniel doesn't care about truth, he cares about winning. And this was his move. They were interrupted by a small voice. Grace Carter stood at the base of the stairs, holding her sketch pad. She looked from Maya to Ethan, sensing the tension. Slowly, she came forward and handed Maya a new drawing, two stick figures standing together while arrows and words swirled around them, bouncing off an invisible shield. Above it, Grace Carter had written, "No one gets in." Maya's throat tightened. She knelt to hug Grace Carter. That's right, she whispered. No one gets in. Later that afternoon, Ethan called an emergency meeting with his communications director and legal counsel. Maya sat in the corner, listening as they strategized damage control, press statements, social media posts, carefully chosen interviews. But it was clear none of them wanted her directly involved. "We can speak for her," the director said. "Putting her in front of cameras will only feed the story." Maya finally spoke up. "If I let them control the narrative without answering for myself, it will never end. They'll keep defining me however they want." Ethan met her Gaza, "And if you speak out, they'll twist your words. This isn't a fair fight." "Then maybe it's time I stop fighting on their terms," Maya said. That evening, she went for a walk in the garden to clear her head. The air was heavy with the scent of late roses, the sky streaked in orange and purple. She found Grace Carter sitting by the fountain, quietly arranging pebbles into shapes. When she saw Maya, she signed sad. Maya hesitated before signing back angry. "But okay." Grace Carter nodded like she understood, then pushed a small pebble into Maya's palm. She signed strong. It was a simple gesture, but it felt like armor. Later that night, as she prepared to leave, Patricia Pat Lewis intercepted her at the door. "You should be careful," she said softly. "People here, they like a scandal, and they like to see someone fall even more." Maya looked her in the eye. "Then they're going to be disappointed." "I'm not falling." On the ride home, the city lights blurred past, and Maya began to think differently about her next move. She had been reacting to Daniel's attacks, always on the defensive. But what if she turned the tables? What if she found out what he was hiding, something that could make him think twice before coming after her again? By the time she reached her apartment, her plan was taking shape. She didn't know exactly where it would lead, but she knew one thing. She couldn't win by standing still, and for Grace Carter's sake, she wouldn't stop moving forward. Somewhere deep down, she suspected the real fight was only just beginning, and when it came, she intended to be ready not just to defend herself, but to strike back. The morning after the expose, Maya woke before dawn, her mind already racing. The decision she'd made the night before felt heavier in the quiet hours, but the weight didn't weaken her. It sharpened her resolve. If Daniel wanted to play dirty, she would find the dirt on him first. The first step was figuring out where to start. She remembered snippets of conversations she'd overheard during her time at the estate, mentions of a private club, an off-site property, and certain meetings Ethan wasn't invited to. It was risky, but it was all she had. Maya called Jessica Moore. "I need a favor," she said, "and it's not the kind you can tell anyone about." By mid-morning, they met in a small diner far from the city center. Jessica Moore slid into the booth with a wary look. "You're talking about digging into Michael Grant. That's dangerous." "I know," Maya said, "but I'm not looking for trouble. I'm looking for insurance. Something that makes him think twice about coming after me or Grace Carter again." Jessica Moore sighed, leaning back. "There's a guy I know. Used to work security for some high-end clients. He's not exactly on the right side of the law anymore, but he's good at finding things people want hidden." 2 hours later, they were in a dimly lit office above a pawn shop, shaking hands with a man named Marcus Hill. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and wore an expression that said he'd seen more than he wanted to. "You want me to dig on roads?" he asked after hearing them out. "That's not a small job, and it's not cheap. I'll find a way to pay you," Maya said. Marcus Hill studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right, but if I find something, you'd better know what you're going to do with it. Some of what I dig up doesn't belong in the open unless you're ready for the fallout." Over the next few days, Maya split her time between Grace Carter's lessons and quiet meetings with Marcus Hill in out-of-the-way places. Every evening, he'd bring her small pieces of the puzzle, financial records that didn't add up, photos of Daniel meeting with men who didn't look like boardroom types, whispers of off-the-book steals. It was enough to make her uneasy, but not enough to pin him to the wall. Meanwhile, the estate was tense. The newspaper story still hung in the air like a bad smell. Staff spoke in hushed voices when Maya passed. Patricia Pat Lewis's greetings were polite, but strained. Even Ethan seemed more guarded, though his loyalty hadn't wavered. "I don't care what they say," he told her one evening. "Grace Carter trusts you. That's all I need." But Maya knew trust wasn't a shield against Daniel's next strike. On the fourth night of her arrangement with Marcus Hill, He handed her a manila envelope. This, he said, isn't proof, but it's a trail, and if you follow it, you might find the real thing. Inside were photos of Daniel at the private club she'd heard mentioned, his arms slung casually around a man Maya recognized from a recent news segment about a fraud investigation. Another photo showed the two of them at what looked like a warehouse loading dock, shaking hands as unmarked crates were loaded into a truck. That warehouse, Marcus Hill said, isn't on any official company records, and I've got a feeling what's inside those crates isn't meant to see daylight. Maya's mind was spinning. If this is what I think it is, it could destroy him or destroy you if you get caught chasing it.